Now I'm unmuted and I mean, you can hear me. Okay. Welcome, everyone. All right. Glad to have you all here today. I'm glad that I had everybody paying attention and letting me know that I was muted. So I'm glad we've got everyone in now. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items for what we're going to cover, and then we're going to get into just the lay of the land, and then we will jump right into the content for the day. And let me know if you can hear me now. Oh, I see yays. Okay, good deal. All right, we got past our AV issues. All right, so for everyone here, one of the most common questions that we usually get is if the call is going to be recorded, and yes, it is. So you will not have to worry about taking notes. You will get the materials delivered directly to your inbox soon after today's event, and that also includes a copy of guides and the recording. So you can also note that all of our recordings for our webinars can be found very easily on WordStream and Local IQ YouTube channels. Just navigate to YouTube, you'll type in Local IQ or WordStream, click on one of our channels, and then you'll be able to see all of our past webinar recordings right there. If you want to catch up on any of our old events, view this webinar recording again, you can find all of that there on those YouTube channels later on. Also, I want to have everybody start practicing in the question box. I know some of you use it because you're here before and you let me know that I was on mute. We get warmed up and we let other folks join on. I want everyone to find that question box and let me know where you're calling in from today. I love hearing where people are coming from because it's really neat. We're all across the country, different businesses, different industries, but we're all coming together for one goal to better our marketing. So for example, I am calling in from Louisiana. And so I'll look at that question box. You can find it over in the side panel of the webinar module. We won't be using the chat feature today, but we will be using the question box. This is how you'll be able to communicate with me and submit any questions that you have throughout the webinar. I see folks calling in from PA, from Florida, West Palm Beach. Oh, it's beautiful there. Oregon, I see another PA. That's awesome. Glad to have you. San Antonio, go Spurs indeed. Gosh, so many people chiming in. I see Texas, Oregon. That's amazing. I see some Canadian friends. Glad to have you here with us today. I see Worcester, Massachusetts, Detroit, Chicago. This is awesome. Miami, I see Brooklyn, Chicago, a lot of East Coasters. That's awesome. So now that we're all acquainted with where we're going to be submitting our questions, and now that we all know where we're calling in from, we're all friends, be sure to stick around for the end where we'll do our live Q&A. You'll use that question box to submit any of your questions throughout the webinar. And then at the end, I'll give you a chance to go ahead and shoot over anything that you hadn't thought of yet. We have a lot of fun in our Q&As. If you haven't attended one in the past, it can feel like a really unique one-to-one experience. So be sure to save some questions for the end for that. And then before I go any further, I want to get us all on the same page of who Local IQ is. Some of you already be working with us, and that's awesome to know about Local IQ and what it is that we do. Some of you may be completely new, and that's awesome too. But then some of you might be familiar with us through our thought leadership brand, WordStream by Local IQ. So how does it all fit together? How did we all get on this call together today? Well, Local IQ is a digital marketing platform. And what we do is we attract and help you retain ideal customers for your business. We do it in a few different ways. We help you get the inside track with our platform. We are able to personalize our approach so that our marketing is specific for not just your industry, but your business. And then we help you get a step with our AI lead management tool. And so how we do that and why we do that is to help businesses grow. We have a passion for businesses and a passion for marketing. And one thing that we're really proud of is that we are a premier partner with all major advertising platforms. And that is nothing that is just granted any marketing agency out there or any marketing platform. It's really something that's only given to businesses that are able to display clear campaign success for their customers. display thought leadership within the field, need a really rigorous set of requirements for each of those platforms. And then a little bit more about me. If you have not attended any of our webinars in the past, my name is Katie, and I am going to be your host and facilitator for the afternoon. Here at Local IQ, I work really closely with our teams on digital marketing and field marketing. And for the last 12 plus years or so, I have worked in one capacity or another with sales teams, agencies, individual business owners, sort of equipped with whatever it is that they need to succeed. And then if you couldn't tell by my accent, and if you joined a little late, I'm located in the southern US in Louisiana. But I always like to tell people I'm not in the fun part of Louisiana. I'm about 5 hours north of New Orleans, but born and raised here, and I love it. And the weather's beautiful today, so I can't complain. All right, and then before we get into the meat of the content, why we're all here today, just a couple of things I wanted to cover. A really common question that we get, in addition to, is this going to be recorded and will we get the slides? We also get a lot of questions about where people can hear more about the topics that we're going to cover here today. To be really honest, this hour is going to fly by. We're going to go through a ton of information, and I'm from the South, so I talk quickly. But if you ever need more time to sit with any of the topics that we cover here today, or really any of the topics that we go through in our webinars, I highly recommend that you go navigate to Local IQ or websites. We cover everything in these webinars really in depth over there in our blogs, as well as on social media. So be sure to follow us. We share out notifications for future events. So if you want to join webinars like this in the future, definitely be sure to follow us and turn on your post notifications. We also share out platform updates, interesting articles, and really anything that advertisers should be aware of within the marketing realm. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube. All right, so if anyone has attended our webinars in the past, I'd love to keep our attendees on their toes. So to warm us up for our topic today, go and find that question box that we talked about earlier, and I'm going to hit you with a quick pop quiz. So what do you think is the most important factor for ranking in AI-driven search? AI has really changed how we search and the way that we receive information from search engines. So think about your own personal experiences, how you go through your own buying decisions. Where is it, and what do you think is going to be the most important thing for businesses to be shown in a world that's sort of driven by AI? Think things like whether it's site speed or maybe device responsiveness. Is it the relevancy of the content? Is it helpful enough? Reviews and trust signals. Maybe it's local SEO showing up on different listing sites. Just let me know sort of like where your head's at. I want to call out some of the responses just to get a quick pulse check on how everyone's feeling about the topic. All right, so I see user-generated content, quality content, web page content. Yes, to all of that. All of that has a huge factor in how things are showing up for search and ranking. I also see things like some keywords, so we'll talk about that in just a little bit as well. Relevancy and I see some more relevant content on websites. So you guys are all on the right track. Third-party reputation management. Yes. So we're all sort of tracking. I wish that I could call out every single one. I see different stuff coming through. And that's because platform is going to be unique. Each business is going to be unique. So I see a ton of different kinds of answers. And I think that just really represents where we're all calling in from and what perspective we're coming into today's call with. So as we go through the topic today, I really want you to be thinking about how any of this could apply to your specific business and your specific situation. At the end of the day, everyone's going to have a different experience and everyone is going to have different goals or different factors. So how you apply what we go over today could be different for whatever situation that you're in. Okay, So we are going to go over how to budget. That's probably, if you weren't a finance or econ major, maybe your least exciting topic, but don't worry, I'm gonna make it fun. We're gonna make it easy because we're also gonna talk about the things that affect your dollars. And I think everyone can appreciate that. Then we're gonna talk through the right setup acts, but really campaign. These are best practices that are gonna make sense for if you're running PMax or not. We're going to then get into the meat of how to avoid wasted spend. I don't like wasting money in my personal life, and I certainly don't want to waste it for my business. And then general tips to optimize, and then there's that live Q&A that I talked about. All right, so first up, how to budget and the gaps that are affecting your dollars. So let's start first with the fact that your budget is really not a number. It's a function of how competitive you expect to be in the auction. So Google and other search platforms are auctions. You're bidding on placement. And so when Google is evaluating how you're ranking, what they're looking at are quality score, your max CPC bid, and then they translate that into your ad rank. So budget isn't only about what you can afford. It's really about what will it take to consistently win the placements that I need to hit my goal. So that's why any good partner or digital manager will first ask you what your goals are. I think a lot of times people just want to jump in and place their advertising and just get them in, but you really have to step back and start working backwards from that to establish your strategy, which includes your budget. All right, so if budget is really about being competitive, the next question really becomes, what are businesses like yours actually spending? Our data shows that nearly 20% of businesses fall into that 20 to 49K range, with advertising, not surprisingly, typically being the top channel that draws from that budget. So that average Google Ads budget range that gets thrown out a lot is roughly between 1,000 to 10,000 a month for most businesses. But that's a range. 1,000 to 10,000 leaves for interpretation. So the goal for us today is to really help you narrow down what is your right range based on a series of considerations. So we'll get through those in just a second. So how you from a wide average range to a budget that actually makes sense for your goals is you anchor everything in metrics.
I don't really care for that lady.
We love a good data set over here. Anytime we can say good budget, what we really mean is a budget grounded in benchmark. According to our own search ads benchmarks that you see here, the average CPC is $5.26 and the average cost per lead is $70.11. These are 2025. We are actually publishing our 2026 metrics in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. That's a shameless plug for some more info that's coming out. But once you have general metrics as your benchmarks, then you can better tighten that further into industry specific benchmarks. Averages, they can really mislead. So while your overall averages over on the left side of the slide are good to get you started, I think what can be really beneficial is digging into your individual industry. So once your CPC and your CPL reality, not just sort of like what you're guessing at, then you can work backwards from the number of leads or conversions that you need to be successful and meet your goals. But there is typically a part that people forget. Campaign is not always the only cost of ads. Be aware that additional purchases coming from outside of your campaign spend are maybe necessary to make your Google ads successful. And really it's just the cost of doing business, but a lot of times people don't factor that in when they're thinking of budgeting for the ads. So for example, you may need to invest in a marketing partner, some sort of freelance designer, or maybe there's another element that you see here on the screen that you need to support the campaigns. This might not directly impact what you're setting your campaign's daily budgets at, but it's really good to keep in mind when you're considering your overall cost and then ultimately your ROI. So dealing with cost and budgeting is probably one of the hardest parts of digital advertising. You know, the fun part is the creative, the fun part's getting the leads, But dealing with the cost and the budgeting is typically going to be the heaviest lift up front. But you do not have to do that kind of stuff on your own. There are plenty of tools that are available either through Google. They have their own budgeting tool that you can use, but then there's also plenty of other free resources, tips, and tools. Local IQ and WordStream offer plenty of different options that are free for you to go in and sort of test and grade your campaigns and see where you're at with your budget. So let's talk about a few of the things that we see as gaps. And the first one I think is going to hit home with almost everyone at some point. So the first gap is conversion volume. And if performance is struggling, it is often because it doesn't have enough conversion data to learn from, or it's measuring only one type that's down a very narrow path. And so your strategy needs to reflect multiple conversion paths, which include things like bills, calls, content engagement, and even chat or SMS, because really people prefer different ways to reach out and convert. So some people prefer a phone call, while I personally rather interact with a chat. I don't want to have to get on the phone with anybody. I'm on the phone all day with people. So I prefer that. But really just remember that even though this is a gap and we're talking specifically about PMax, these can really help with any sort of campaign that you're dealing with. And when we're talking about any other campaign, this is where something like cross-channel really matters. People bounce between platforms before they act. And so if you are not seeing enough conversions in PMax with another campaign or another digital solution, or testing a CTA that maybe could convert at a higher rate could help. I wouldn't necessarily go straight for the budgeting, because really the stronger your input, so the conversion path that we're talking about, the stronger your being. And I'm seeing a note about maybe some poor audio. I'm hoping that maybe it's just some poor internet connection. Maybe the wind blew a little too hard over here in Louisiana. If you have any more problems hearing me, just let me know. So let's take a look at the next slide. So our second gap is around poor targeting. Targeting is going to be a major issue with PMax. And again, not just with PMax, it is across the board. We see targeting gaps all the time for new clients who come in across all campaign types, regardless of channel or platform. And so what's changed is that automation without some sort of oversight means that there's going to be mistakes that show up faster. It can cost you more sometimes. So in automated campaigns, especially, it can feel like you've lost control. And that's really where a lot of advertisers get stuck. Poor performance can usually get traced back to signals that are too bad, maybe they're outdated, they're not closely tied to what a real customer would be doing, how they would actually really prefer or behave. So what we see works best in combining automation with human oversight. Automation is powerful. It changes our daily lives. It's going to perform best when it's guided by people who understand your business and are in the background actively reviewing performance. They're refining your signals, they're making strategic adjustments, and all of that is to prevent from drifting off course. Even though the automation is really smart and it's great, it's still not a set it and forget it situation. All right, and so I'm seeing a couple of other confirmations that I'm choppy. So let me see if maybe switch and see if that helps. All right, you guys let me know if that helps at all, or if I'm still coming across funny, and then we'll see what we can do about it. All right, so back to our second gap. The way that what you can do, regain traction. So you notice that you're off, you're not performing as well. Take a step back. And that's when you're going to want to look at the analytics and the reporting that you're dealing with. And then you are going to want to go in and intentionally diversify your targeting groups. So things like prospecting, lookalikes, retargeting, all of that is something that you need to consider so that the platform isn't guessing in the dark. And then when targeting is tightened, the next big lever is going to be your creative assets. Like me and you didn't love any of your or econ classes, the creative part is where you have more fun. And so this is where you would want to lean in a little bit more. Anytime you have poor ad assets, that can really suppress performance across any campaign, just PMax. But again, the impact can be amplified because there's that automation. So across all channels, we see creative as one of the most common gaps. Audiences expect more visually these days and more quickly than they used to. Plus, many times a placement today is going to rely more heavily on strong creative. You're going to need to bring your A game when you're coming in with creative and mix it up a lot more than what you might think you do. So the rule is simple. The more quality creative that you put into the build, the better. We talked about inputs and outputs a second ago. So that's regardless of campaign type. And so that means diversifying the creative formats, the ad copy, the CTAs, and then maintaining really strong quality control. Oh, good, much better. You guys can hear me now. So practical way to diagnose this, using performance data directionally. So for example, if you have a search campaign that's performing really well, but then over here you have YouTube or maybe your display is lagging, that is often a sign that your visual or your video assets probably need attention. It isn't necessarily the street itself, so you don't need to go and start, recreating the wheel or anything. So before we move along to some more of our best practices, let's take a quick pulse check. All right, it's pop quiz time again. And then I'm getting some notes that maybe there's some folks muted, that there's some background noise. So I've kicked all my kids out of my house. So if you happen to not be on mute, everyone should have been muted, but just go ahead and mute yourself. So find that pop quiz question box. Let's talk a little bit about what are the most reasons campaigns don't perform. So in your opinion, when you are looking through your campaigns or maybe you're seeing others or competitors, there's no wrong answers. I just want to see where people are experiencing some friction in their own lives. Is it budgeting, tracking, creative, maybe? Is it the ad assets? Is it the targeting? Maybe it's lead quality. Just throw it into the question box and let me know. I see wrong target audience. I see quality. Yep. Budgeting. So you've gone ahead and targeted that answer. All right, keep chatting me some options. I just want to get a feel before we go any further about what's going on and what you need to get. I see additional targeting, tracking, that can have a big impact, creative fatigue, complexity of the platforms. I understand that. Small issues. Okay. All right. So we're all on the same page. We're having similar issues, but nothing maybe that we haven't discussed yet or that we're not going to discuss. So let's talk about what we need to do to up correctly, not just for PMax, but really any campaign. We've talked about the inputs that are going to help it learn faster, waste less, and then drive better outcomes. So first up, where our optimism really happens in an automated campaign is at your assets and your structure. So for some of you who are thinking through creative, or maybe the tracking or the initial setup, this is for you. So what this visual on the screen is really showing is how optimization works in a modern automated campaign, especially with Performance Max. But again, it applies to anything. So at the center, you've got the platform's automation that's doing the heavy lifting. It's the powerhouse. And so around that, puts that you control. Things like campaign goals, creative assets, targeting signals, feeds, any sort of brand safety guardrails. So the good news is, for some of you who are throwing in answers that were similar to that, all of this is under control. We can figure it out together. We can know what to do. So every campaign is only as effective as the quality and the consistency of those inputs that you see there. So if we look at the screen, this is where the optimization becomes actionable, bullets. So first is going to be your asset groups. These are how you organize creative by theme. So similar to ad groups in more
Good boy.
traditional campaigns, structuring these thoughtfully gives the platform clear direction on which messages and visuals belong together and when to use them. Let me see if I'm able to mute. I think I hear some more noise in the background. Okay, so next is high quality creatives. This is critical. Automation does not replace creative strategy. It is going to amplify it. So whether assets are uploaded manually or they're generated with AI, they really need to be on brand. What you'll need to do is be intentional around what you're creating, make sure it's really relevant. So strong creative is what's going to give the system better material to test, learn from, optimize against, no matter the channel. And there is a lot of AI options out there. And then when you're working with partners who can consult on what creative is going to be performing the best, or platforms that like local IQs, like our platform has learned what creative assets professed. And so those are the kinds of things that can help you with the high quality creatives. And then finally, ad placement. So one of the benefits of a campaign like a Performance Max is it's going to reach across multiple placements. So you're going to go across search, just video. We talked about just sort of being everywhere where people are searching. So instead of choosing a placement manually, the platform is going to learn where your audience is most likely to convert, and it adjusts accordingly using performance data over time. And so that's the way that PMax. And so when you're working with partners with additional technology, like Local IQ has combined PMax into one of our other AI solutions. So they're working together to complement and further strengthen all of those learnings. So things, assets, and the creatives and the ad placements are going to learn over time. And all of this reinforces why it's really important to have an always on approach. I know a lot of times you feel like budget constraints can get in the way, but it's really important because people's decisions are so long, to always have some sort of awareness happening. The longer a campaign runs with consistent goals and assets, the more confidently the platform is going to be able to optimize that across the audience and the placements. So if you're pausing or maybe you're constantly rebuilding campaigns, that's going to end up slowing the learning and ultimately limit the performance of the campaign. So when we talk about optimization, it really is less about tweaking and back in the nuts and bolts. It's more about the upfront optimization, about adding strong assets, refining the structure, and then giving the system time to learn and then making adjustments based off of that. So once you've set an asset foundation that is strong and reliable, your next decision is going to be, how are you going to ask Google to bid with your budget? So when launching a new PMax campaign, you've got two options. Specifically for PMax, you can either maximize conversions, and this is going to get the highest number of conversions for your budget dollars. Or you can maximize conversion value. And this is what gets the highest value conversions. So you can get fewer conversions. Strategy, the idea is that each conversion is going to be worth more. So a best practice is, if you're launching new, gather conversion data before you are leaning hard into something like target CPA or target ROAS, because the algorithm really needs signal quality before it can optimize efficiently. And bidding only works as well as the conversion signals that you're feeding it. So we've covered bidding and we've covered assets. So let's talk a little about tracking. At a foundational level, strong campaign performance is going to start with solid conversion tracking. And all that really means is what is telling your ad performs, which actions actually matter to your business. So things like purchases, form fills, calls, or even qualified leads, and then you're assigning a value to those actions, telling your ads which are the most important. So this slide is a really good reminder that strategy drives efficiency. So when your conversions are clearly defined and you're consistently measuring them, platforms can make much smarter optimization decisions. And that's really important when campaigns become automated. So even though the automation helps and it makes life easier, it still doesn't mean that you can sit back. It still requires some ongoing oversight and some maintenance. Results aren't where you need them after enough runway. Review those audience signals. One of the first places to look is those audience signals section. This is true across campaigns in general, but it's especially important in automated environments where the platform is learning from the data that you give it. So best here is to prioritize your real business data over something that is broad or generic interest targeting. The closer your signals are to actual customer behavior, the better the system can learn who is worth spending budget on. We don't want to waste our budget around here. So things like customer lists, when you have permission to use them, these are usually going to be the strongest starting signal. They are so powerful because they reflect real people who have already engaged, purchased, or shown true intent in your business. Next up is intent-based audiences that help add context. Then if you layer in things like keywords and behaviors, this gives the platform much more clarity around why someone may bid, not just who they are. When customer lists aren't available or large enough, website visitors and converters are a really strong alternative. So even really simple signals like a site traffic or maybe a past form fill still help the system find the people who look and behave more like those people. Those are your ideal customers. And so the goal is not to limit the reach. What you're wanting to do is really guide the automation. So it's spending more time learning from the right people and then less time sort of experimenting, because it's experimenting with your money. And here's why this matters so much. The audience signals affect the whole business. These are not just about marketing. When you don't prioritize your lead quality, it creates this ripple effect that goes throughout your business. You are spending on people who aren't a fit. So then sales are following up on dead leads, and then your pipeline slows. So it may look fine on the surface because leads are coming in, you think you're doing great, but underneath, you end up paying for volume, not quality, which is really part of our whole topic here today. And so that's why this isn't really a marketing problem in and of itself. It becomes a whole business situation. So now that we've covered setup, let's get super tactical. How do you avoid wasted spend in things like creative and tracking and bidding? So we're going to go over some practical optimization moves that you can start right now, even if you're not going to change your entire strategy overnight, which is that we don't recommend. So first, confirm conversion tracking and goals, because PMax is going to be heavily goal driven. What you see here is a layout of the 4 big conversion categories. Think website actions, sales, clicks, page views, signups. Then you have app interactions, which are installs and in-app actions, phone calls, calls from your ads, calls to the site number, maybe a mobile click to call, and then things like imports. This is GA4, CRMs. A lot of people use Salesforce, HubSpot. If you're in specific industries, things like Service Titan or Yardi, offline conversions. And so you, especially if you're working with a partner, being able to integrate those CRMs and that import data is really, really important. And so that's why it's such a key to conversion tracking. And so the overall point here is that PMax is going to be goal driven to things like sales, awareness, downloads, but it can only optimize well if the conversion data is accurate. Again, your output is only as strong as your input. So one thing that we can also note is that within a PMax campaign, insights like remarketed versus new customers or brand versus non-brand, these are not going to be as transparent. So your tracking strategy has to do a lot more heavy in the beginning. And that's honestly where a lot of campaigns are going to struggle. Tracking is often incomplete or conversions are set up, but maybe nobody's actively validating whether the data matches what sales is seeing down. That's why reporting matters just as much as tracking. What you need is visibility into what's converting, where those conversions are coming from, and then which actions are actually turning into revenue. And then self-managing complex campaigns like this can feel like chaos, and it can be a time management nightmare. We are big proponents of reporting and monitoring and analyzing your metrics around here. And that's because in reality, when you're self-managing really complex cross-channel things, it gets crazy really fast. And then without a system, that's when good leads get lost or maybe they go cold. And so this is where having the ability to look at lead management, to have a workflow system, to have transparency into what your ads are bringing in is going to be really important, because that's where you're going to prioritize your hot leads, create follow-up consistently. That's where you're going to be able to nurture the rest of what is out there that isn't right now, not wasting the demand paid for. You got them this far, how can you keep them? So what can really help put all of that together is having some sort of smart lead management solution that is going to manage your leads from end to end. And whether that is you have a resource and you're using your CRM, or for Local IQ, that looks like our Dash AI lead management platform, having something that allows you to follow up and identify those good leads is really only going to speed up the process and make the most of the dollars that you've spent thus. And because PMax can show across search, shopping, display, and YouTube, exclusions really matter for brand safety and efficiency. So if I'm thinking about the search or shopping side of things, account level negative keywords, we talked about keywords earlier. This is what helps point up on something that's irrelevant or maybe a little risky across the campaign. And that is included in PMax, but it also includes anytime you're running a regular search campaign. On display and YouTube, you also want to monitor placements, because what your ads show next to matters. And so for e-commerce and product feeds, really remember this stat: 17% of products in ad catalogs are out of stock. That is a real way spend gets wasted if it is fed into an ad and exclusions are not tightened up. All right, so it is pop quiz time again. Let's see if you guys are tracking with me. All right, I want you to think about this one for a minute or two and then type your answer into the question box. What percentage of website visitors convert on their first visit? You can throw out any number, just let us know, just whatever your gut says. And it's important because how you answer this, a lot of insight into how you're thinking about and approaching your audience and your funnel currently. So go to that question box, let me know what you're thinking, what percentage of site visitors, someone who goes to your website, how many of those visitors convert on their first visit? All right, I see 10%, 5%, 15, I see 20%, 10, another 10, 5, 26%, 3%. Okay, this is good. All right, so for my folks who picked 3%, you were incredibly close. If we don't do Price is Right rules, then you are good to go. The answer is just 2%. That roughly 8% of the people who land on your website are not converting the first time that they visit. And when you really sit with that for a second, it feels kind of wild, right? Because that means that the vast majority of your audience isn't ready to take action yet. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your website necessarily. It just means that they're not ready to move. The buying journey hasn't gotten to that point for them yet. So they're still in that phase where they're researching, or maybe they're comparing options, or they're just getting familiar with what you offer. They're just looking around. But most marketing strategies are not built with that in mind. They're built around immediate conversions. And this is where things start to break down. So if you have campaigns that are optimized for conversions only. Think like form fills, calls, purchases. You are essentially optimizing for the smallest and most ready to buy portion of your audience. And these are people who are already close to making a decision. You've just kind of, nudged them over the finish line. But meanwhile, you have the other 98%. You've got all of those people who need more time, more context, more touch points. They need more something. And they aren't really being nurtured or guided forward if all you're doing is serving them ads that are at the very end of that journey. So what ends up happening is constantly trying to capture the same small little group, like this little orangish yellow group of folks down at the bottom. That is your high intent users. And instead of building a system that moves blue people from that larger group. So now that we took a break and talked about like some philosophical changes or some gaps that we need to make in our thinking, one of the tactical controls that you can do is around location setting. So the default for PMax is presence or interest, which means that you can show to people outside your service area who are simply interested in whatever it is that you're doing. So if you truly only want to reach people physically in your location, you need to switch to presence only. This is very tactical button click things that can make a huge difference. So you've got the levers. Now let's put this into some thought starters for what needs to happen now. Because we have all the knowledge, now let's adapt. Let's do it a little smarter. So this slide is your practical checklist. These are the things that matter most when you're running and maintaining automated AI-driven campaigns. So just remember Google's recommendation. It can be super helpful, but they are not a one size fits all. Every business is different. Every goal and situation is different. And so you need to consider the pros and cons that come with every single rec. So the key is understanding which ones align with your business goals, and then maybe which ones need a more measured approach. Just don't blindly take Google at their word. Next, understanding what data to feed the AI. Automation is only as strong as its input. High quality conversion tracking, audience signals, and assets are what's the system clearer direction and then lead to better outcomes. And then you'll also want to optimize for AI generated ad placements. That means building campaigns and creatives that are flexible enough to perform across multiple different channels, things like search, display, YouTube, and then any other emerging AI driven surfaces. The basic theme is don't just place for one type. And then along with that, refreshing creatives for AI delivery is going to be critical. AI favors variety, freshness, relevance, and honestly, people do too. We are going to pay more attention to something that is fresh and new and changing and relevant to us. Your assets are stale, performance plateau. It's just the nature of it, no matter how smart the bidding strategy is. So be sure to change out those creatives. And then another big one is the cross-channel strategy paired with full funnel tracking. So your buyers don't move in line, neither do you. Think about your own personal purchases. And so your measurements of that shouldn't either. You're going to need to connect touch points across channels, and that'll give you a much clearer picture of what's actually driving the results. And then back to the transparency, the reporting, the prioritization, all of that really helps. And then finally, getting organized on lead management. Driving the lead is just the first step, and you have worked so hard to get that lead through the door. So getting a strong system for presentation and nurturing and follow-ups are what's going to turn all of the marketing performance and all of the hard work into real pipeline and revenue. And so if you focus on these areas, just reacting to performance, you're building a strategy that's designed to improve over time. All right, so if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, so what does this look like for my account and my business? Well, you're on the right track. Your mind is spinning the way. So the fastest way to reduce wasted, oops, sorry, I went ahead of myself. The fastest way to reduce that wasted spend is to really get some sort of expert analysis around what's happening with your tracking, your audience signals, any sort of creative coverage. So before we hop into the Q&A, I want to offer something that's really helpful and really easy if you'd like to get a second set of eyes, any sort of campaign that you're running. So this is for anyone who wants to put today's strategies into practice right now. We can provide a free personalized recommendation on your campaigns. This is a ton of information and it's a lot going through our heads. So this is not just a generic audit. This is a goal that's going to pinpoint where you are most likely wasting now. And then it's going to give you a custom to improve lead quality. So while I have that up, what we're going to do is move into what is the audio portion of the webinar, and we're going to open it up for that live Q&A that I was talking about. So if you have been holding on to questions or you have something you want to ask around what we covered today, go ahead and put it in the chat. And then if you're thinking I'm a little overwhelmed, or maybe I've tried some of the things that you talked about, but I haven't seen success, then I would click yes to that poll. It's going to stay up for the rest of the time that we're talking, because what that'll do is let you be able to talk to someone who can look at your campaigns and help maybe give some guidance on what to do best next. And so I see a lot of coming in. Go ahead, keep adding your questions to the question box, and I'm going to start going through them and answering while folks are responding to the poll. Okay, so I see one around how long should I let a PMax run before deciding if it's working? Okay, this is a real question. We get this one a lot. How long do I need to wait before I start figuring out what to do next? In most cases, automated campaigns like something like PMax, they need time and data. That's the thing with AI and automation. So typically you're going to want a few weeks at minimum, depending on your conversion volume. That said, it's really not just about the time. If you're tracking and your audience or maybe creative inputs aren't solid, any longer is not going to fix it. So give the campaign enough runway with the right inputs. So again, feel really solid and confident with what you're putting out there, and then give the campaign time to learn. And like I said, a few weeks at minimum, but it's going to be different for everybody. Okay, I see a ton of questions coming in. Let me keep scrolling and see which one. I see a lot of really specific questions too. And so if you have something really, really specific, I would ask you to click yes to that poll, because you can talk to one of our experts and they'll be able to speak to your specific vertical, your specific business. Okay, what's the most common targeting mistake that you see? On what we see a lot is relying too heavily on either broad or generic audiences without layering in some sort of real business data. So when platforms don't have some sort of clear guidance on who their customers are, that's when they'll prioritize volume over the quality. And that's when you're going to see lead quality and efficiency start to drop. So that's mostly what we see. Okay, let me see. I think we have time for more. Let's see. How often should creatives be refreshed? So there's no timeline that's going to work for everyone on this one. I'm sorry. I know that nobody probably wants to hear that. But a good rule of thumb is to review your creative at regular intervals. Again, we are huge fans of reporting and being able to look at the creative level reporting and performance. And that's when you're going to want to just keep an eye on it at a regular pace, and then refresh, start to see it plateau, or maybe when it starts to just feel too repetitive. AI really prefers variety and freshness. And so that's why I wouldn't just set it and forget it. I would constantly eye on how it's doing, and then be able to make changes as soon as you can. So I see a ton more questions. I wish that I could answer them all today. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time together. But if you still have, if I wasn't able to get to something today, if you would like to speak to someone about a strategy, maybe you don't have one, or you want to know what that would look like for your business or your industry, click yes to that poll. We'll have someone contact you, and then they can talk through any of the specifics with you and then help you with any of your questions and keep your business growing. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being here, and we will see you on the next webinar. Thanks so much.